All the way back in Dead Rising 2, we played as protagonist Chuck Green, a motocross star battling his way through Fortune City during a zombie outbreak for the sake of his daughter Katie, unraveling the mysteries as to why there was an outbreak even to begin with. It was a good story, and with the protagonist being a dad, just trying to do the right thing by himself and his kid, it even had moments of heartwarmth. However, in the back of my mind, I really missed Frank West, lead hero of the original Dead Rising. What happened to Frank after the events of Willamette, and why isn't he here reporting on these events now? And before I get into the comments, I know that there was a DLC where he shows up on day 3. I'm letting that one go. But color me surprised when Dead Rising 2 Off the Record released, just a year after the launch of the original, now starring our boy Frankie. That's right, ladies and gents, we are returning to Dead Rising for the final video in the main game series, that being Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, the spin-off title of Dead Rising 2, not only to complete the series, but kind of as a thank you of sorts. My Dead Rising videos were the first real success I've ever had on YouTube, and for that I am humbly grateful for each and every one of you who have watched those or any of the content here on the channel. And as a commemoration of hitting that lauded 1,000 sub goal for the channel, it felt fitting to do one last Dead Rising video before hitting the next series here. In this video, we'll be analyzing the good, the bad, and the ugly of Dead Rising 2 Off the Record. So if you like this type of analytical, long-form gaming review and retrospective content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you really like the content, feel free to join the membership as well for the low price of 99 cents. Links are all down below in the description. Go on, do it. Okay, cool, thanks. But with that out of the way, let's get into Dead Rising Off the Record, the non-canonical what if of the Dead Rising series.
Neither rain, nor sleet, nor hail, nor zombies are going to keep me from my appointed rounds. I swore an oath, sir, and this package requires a signature!
Whatever, man, if it makes you feel better. I could use that anyway.
We open the game focused on Frank, looking at his rise and fall from grace and prosperity after the events of the original game. Having been the whistleblower on the Willamette incident and the government cover-up and creation of the zombie virus, Frank became a sort of rock star, having his own TV show, op-eds written about him, and fan adoration of his work. However, the instant rise to the celebrity profile is a tale as old as time, and as the fame got to his head, he began to run into PR nightmare after PR nightmare, leading to his inevitable downfall. Turning to booze and presumably hookers in this scene, the scene ends with Frank down on his luck and wanting to get back on top once more. The scene fades as we see Frank now, dressed in a wrestler outfit, about to be a star in Terror is Reality, the TV show from the original game.
Sorry about that, it's just, it's been a while.
You've always been a big hero of mine, Mr. West. I was really bummed when your show went off the air.
But this time as a contestant. The game show sees its contestants murdering as many zombies as possible in a set amount of time in order to, you guessed it, make cash. After signing an autograph for a fan backstage, we get into the ring, punching, kicking, and pushing zombies into various meat grinders, flame torrents, and bashing their heads in with 2x4s and baseball bats. You know, your typical Dead Rising fare. We are also introduced to TK, the same antagonist we know from the original Dead Rising 2. However, after the match, as Frank gets redressed after the event, he spies TK in what looks like to be a homeless man heading into the warehouse. And if you played the original Dead Rising 2, you maybe know who this is. Falling for a scoop on maybe something interesting going on, we are introduced to Frank's tried and true photography. I mean, he has covered wars, you know. Witnessing a handoff between TK and the guy of a briefcase full of cash and what looks to be a bomb, we capture the footage from the catwalks above with an obvious story there to be told. Frank gets cornered by TK's goons, and after their beatdown, the outbreak begins, with the scene from the original essentially playing again. Explosions, stuck in an elevator, zombies flooding the arena and spreading across Fortune City. Frank, like Chuck, escapes into the safe room where we learn that Frank is still infected after the events of the first game, still needing Zombrex in order to not turn into a zombie himself. Zombrex is a sort of infection-stopping drug that is delineated from the very cure made by Frank and Isabella in the original Dead Rising, a drug that many need, and as we can see from the pawn shops, the links others will do to get it, this stuff is obviously in high demand. After going to the pharmacy to get the last box of Zombrex, we head back to the safe house, and here the story begins to delineate quite a bit from the original. Meeting with Stacy, we get the same news broadcast, this time showing a hippie dude from earlier planting the bomb, blaming Cure, the activist group, for perpetrating the outbreak, rather than our main protagonist like in the original. Cure is a group of activists that are in Fortune City to protest the Terror is Reality show for zombie rights, which on the face seems a little crazy, but maybe not blowing up and releasing an outbreak kind of crazy. Frank here sees this as his big break and begins to investigate the cause of the outbreak in Fortune City, with the sole purpose of bringing him back on top once again. So, camera in hand, we head back out into the Vegas-inspired mallscape for some zombie bashing fun and to solve the mysteries along the way.
Cameras, lady. What the hell were you thinking? Your group's got a reputation, but come on.
Cure had nothing to do with this.
It's pretty easy to say that, isn't it? But you're gonna need more than that. You better start talking. Right now.
I'm telling you, we're being set up. We've been accused of things before, but we don't believe in violence. We're someone's convenient excuse.
Oh, really?
It's not the first time members of Cure have been falsely accused of being involved with an outbreak. I've got to find whoever leaked that tape. That damn TK and his horrible show.
I'm not saying I believe you, but something's not right here. That's for damn sure. I needed something to get back in the game. I investigate this, and maybe I get back to doing what I do best. That reporter, where is she?
Now, if you have played a Dead Rising game before, you pretty much know what to expect here. And with this game essentially being another version of Dead Rising 2, much of the gameplay elements here are still the same. We still bash, shoot, and scoot our way through massive hordes of zombies, looking for new items, combo weapon cards, new outfits, and survivors along the way. It has been funny going back to this game, to be honest, as I barely remember playing through it at all when it first released, seeing as how it was released a year after its sibling title with the same moniker of Dead Rising 2 in it. And for the most part, it is essentially still the same game with some minor changes and additions to add a bit more content into the mix. In an interview with Destructoid before release, executive producer Jason Lee really spelt out the vision for what Capcom Vancouver saw for this re-release. And I quote, "Originally the plan was that we were going to do a director's cut of Dead Rising 2. Capcom has had a long history of successful director's cuts, especially with the Resident Evil series, and we wanted to bring that same treatment to Dead Rising franchise. But when Dead Rising 2 was first announced, something strange happened. Fans of the franchise were excited for its return, and the development team were confident players would click with the game's strong new hero, Chuck Green. But the feedback was clear. Many felt that something was missing. That something was Frank West, as fans asked, why did you take our hero away? What this did for us and for this product was to create an incredibly interesting opportunity. What if, instead of doing a director's cut, what if we re-envisioned the outbreak of Fortune City with Frank West as the hero? What would that do to the missions? What would that do to the story? What would that do to the gameplay, bringing him back with his camera?" In looking at said quote, it makes a ton of sense why this game was made. It's true that when Dead Rising 2 released, I too was kind of confused as to why we had a protagonist change, and while Chuck was equally fine, there was something missing about the exclusion of Frank. Frank brings a levity to the scenario that Chuck just never did. Witty remarks, bad insults, and an undying drive to capture a story is part of the charm laid out in the original title.
Too bad I don't dig flat chicks. This bastard better not be heavy. No offense, but I really don't want to eat that.
So to see the same tone recaptured in Fortune City again is awesome to have back. Frank is an icon, the face of the series, a perfect foil for the wild and zany gameplay Dead Rising is built upon. What I found interesting though is the further characterization of Frank and how the events of the first game have actually affected him. Blinded by fame, he did what most celebrities and honestly football stars do, that being self-sabotaged in his rise to fandom. In the opening scene, he seems jaded with the world, even being snarky at the backstage attendant who just wanted his autograph. We see Frank's face plastered all around the mall as we explore, another 30 seconds of fame in order to make a quick buck. However, as Frank dons his normal attire, he looks at the wad of cash, seemingly dejected at what he feels like he has to do in order to be in the spotlight once more and to make a little bit of money. Not that $250,000 is a little bit of money. So when the opportunity appears for a story, Frank jumps at the opportunity, getting his original spunk and gusto back as he follows TKs in the rafters. Once we make it to the safe house, Frank is in the thick of it, in his element again, and it shows. This whole beginning section I feel could have been extended a little bit to get a bit more of the change in the psyche of Frank, but it's still great character building, even though unfortunately this story is non-canon.
I'll make you a deal. You two do your little investigation. You see if you can help this troublemaker. But ain't no one gonna cover her ass when the military arrives, and she ain't allowed off the premises. I'll be guarding the door. Don't think I won't do what I have to do.
What was that all about?
He just takes his job too seriously.
Tell me you found something.
We checked out Central Security. Someone's definitely trying to hide something. Everything was smashed to pieces. This is
As we head into the mall once more, the gameplay here is exactly the same as the original Dead Rising 2. You run around the mall and casino, picking up items in various stores, restaurants, and off the cold dead corpses of your enemies, and dispatch as many zombies as humanly possible. One thing I found when playing Off the Record is that it seemed like the zombie density was a lot thicker and the game itself was actually a bit harder. In further research actually, that is actually the case, as Frank is meant to also be stronger than Chuck was at the very beginning. Couple that with a flood of zombies, and there's a real challenge here in the early game of Off the Record, and something which I actually truly enjoyed. Dead Rising was never hard on a mechanics front. You hit the X button, kill things, and move on. Where the challenge came in was maneuvering through the horde effectively in order to meet all the time requirements Dead Rising is known for. That's right, we still have a real timer here, boys and girls, and I may be misremembering, but a lot of these windows seem a lot tighter than even in Dead Rising 2. I've said this before, but this singular aspect is maybe my favorite aspect of the first two Dead Rising games, and the main reason why I was not so hot on Dead Rising's 3 or 4. Being late for anything tends to make people anxious, and so when you, the player, is presented with a timer in a game where you need to be at a certain location by a certain period of time, the tension that breeds is extremely high, and for many players, too high to where the game is not really enjoyable. I personally thrive on this, seeing this challenge as something that can be overcome with a little bit of planning and knowledge of the space. It is not uncommon to have 3 objectives, all 3 of them spread out in different casinos and malls. Having a route, knowing the shortcuts, and prepping with enough food and weapons ahead of time is key here, ensuring to buy yourself some of that oh shit room in case anything unforeseen happens, like running into other random survivors along the way. Couple that with the intensity of the amount of zombies on the screen, all while managing your own health as well as the others in your group, and needless to say, things can get really fucking tense. In regards to the survivor AI, it seems no amount of time will be able to make these fools any smarter, as once again, there's a lot of suffering with these survivors sticking to walls, getting trapped by zombies, or not following you into the next room. Off the Record did add a smart feature, however, that being the icon that appears by a survivor's name and health if they are close enough to go into the next area with you, a huge pain point for me in the last 2 games. With this, I knew when they were able to follow and would hover around doors yelling to hurry up over and over again until they got their rear in gear and the door icon appeared. That rhymed unintentionally. The timers here are just as brutal as they were before, and still something that is both anxiety inducing as well as exhilarating at the same time. I do wish the AI was smarter and could actually break out of a zombie hold instead of just sitting there and dying. But there is something to be said about the jank having a little bit of charm as well. It's frustrating, but workable. And I guess you could pick up the Survivor books and they do get a little bit better, but it's really hard to tell. And combat in Off the Record is essentially the same as it was in the last 2 games as well, that being a focus on pummeling zombies to death with items in the world around you. Like Dead Rising 2, combo weapons are here to stay. These being combinations of 2 items in the world to make something a bit more powerful, and minus a couple of additions, most of these are still the same as they were before. So having the standard go-tos like my Sledgehammer Axe Defiler combo or the Spiked Bat or the Knifed Boxing Gloves were still more than viable here for any given scenario. There are some new additions here as well, like the Decapitator Boomerang and the Electric Sledgehammer to add into the mix, but all the original classics are here as well. Even though simple combat in these games has never gotten old for me, it is the dumb mindless fun to go around and bash the heads of the Greyskins in, with hundreds more coming right behind it, ready for a taste of some sort of medicine. With the inclusion of the motorcycle combos as well, that was in Dead Rising 2, Fortune City is probably still my favorite playground for when it comes to mass zombie killing, and it seems to be the case for most people, as Off the Record includes a sandbox mode, where you can just roam the space killing everyone and everything in sight, while doing some challenges to earn money for Frank to use in the main game. I did some roaming around here at a certain point of the game where I needed to collect $1 million, and it was honestly a great time just roaming around, building weapons, mowing through everything with little pinch on the timing front. And speaking of money, that's another big change from the original Dead Rising 2 to Off the Record, is the importance of cash. Seeing as how this is a Vegas-inspired space, along with Frank's need for money after his failures, cash becomes far more plentiful, while also being far more important. There are a number of survivors now that you will actually need to pay in order for them to follow you back, as even in the zombie apocalypse, everybody still needs to get their own bag. Couple that with the return of the pawn shops and the entire story case where you need to bring $1 million to TK, you will be collecting a lot of money. I do think that the collecting of $1 million is a lot, but you can take the time to find the new collectibles in the world world, that being safety deposit box keys, where you can stack up cash a lot quicker. Alongside combat, we also have the return of the camera system from Dead Rising 1. Frank is a photojournalist for those uninitiated, and taking pictures is the name of his game. With the return of the PP stickers, events, and just taking dope photos, this is a whole new avenue to level up, increasing your inventory size, health, attack power, and gaining new moves and combo cards. There are a ton of distractions and off the record you can do, and all of them give that original Dead Rising feel of the first game with the weapon systems in the sequel. This game truly feels like a blending of the first two games, bringing over all the elements that made the original so unique with all the upgrades of 2. Honestly, and going to play this, Off the Record may actually be my favorite game in the Dead Rising series, and one I plan on going back to time and time again.
You're Frank West!
And you are?
Oh, you know me. I'm Slappy! Everyone knows Slappy! And everyone knows you! You're good at stuff! I saw it on TV!
The other major staple in the series is the psychopath boss fights, and as with everything else in this game thus far, a lot of it is still recycled from the original version of Dead Rising 2. From Randy, the obese fetishistic guy trying to marry a random girl in the chapel, Antoine, the king of French cuisine, to Slappy, the mascot for the Kids' Choice clothing brand, all the originals make their return, each one just as broken from the Outbreak as they were before, this time with dialogue that obviously better suits Frank's return. Most of these guys seemingly know Frank as well, which is mildly entertaining. We also have some new originals here as well, many of them being related to the story, which we will discuss in this section of the video. But by far my favorite new psychopath in Off the Record was Evan McIntyre, the brother of Adam McIntyre. For those who don't remember, was the crazed clown in the Wonderland Plaza in the original game. Evan, being a nice ice cream clown man, uses liquid nitrogen while running around on stilts in order to avenge his brother from before, only to get knocked down to his true size and subsequently frozen and then shattered. This fight, while kind of easy, is a great nod to the original Psychopath, who I honestly feel is probably the most memorable of Dead Rising 1. The other inclusion is none other than Chuck Green, having gone insane from the loss of his daughter, replacing the motorcycle fight from the original game to fighting with Chuck. It's clear that this game really is an alternate timeline, and again, non-canonical, as Chuck appears in Dead Rising 3. But this is what if scenario is a great callback to the original sequel as well. While this fight still kind of sucks, as hitting a guy with chainsaws attached on his motorcycle is a pain in the ass, the what if Chuck went insane is a nice addition, and great touch to bring back a character that we were in the shoes of before. Also, can I just say that it's super depressing to see him carrying around a mannequin as a replacement for Katie, who we can assume is zombified by this point. Psychopaths in Dead Rising have always been some of the best set pieces in the game, and while their deaths are not nearly as gruesome as they were in the original, the variation in mechanics and styles of these madmen are just as fun, and a nice little vignette to go ahead and beat your way through. The other major addition to Off the Record is in the entirely new area known as the Uranus Zone. Connected to the Atlantic Casino and the Fortune Plaza, this space-themed theme park is the newest addition to the spaces to explore and murder at. Sporting rides, bars, carnival games, and again, loads of zombies, this 80s space-themed area is super cool in my opinion, mostly just due to its style. Sporting the bank with the safety deposit boxes as well, if you find the keys, you can come back here a lot to open those bad boys up. However, I did feel this space was a bit underutilized, as there is essentially only a single survivor found here, one psychopath fight, and then the last boss fight of the game. If a new area comes into any game, it just feels weird when you don't give the player things to do in said area. It seems like a no-brainer to set up a new psychopath here. I mean, hell, it's themed perfectly for one, as well as maybe some additional story missions. By the time I got to the end of the game, I realized that I only ever needed to be here maybe 4 times in total throughout the entire playthrough of this game, which is a bit of a shame due to how cool this area actually is. Along with some minor bug fixes, name changes, and revamped health bars, those are the bulk of the changes that are present here in Dead Rising 2 Off the Record. Let me know what your favorite change was in the comments down below, and with that out of the way, let's dive into the true difference maker in Off the Record, that being the story of Frank West and his battle in Fortune City.
That guy kind of cracked me up.
Continue where we left off, venturing out into the mall to see who started the outbreak and why. Meeting up with Channel 6 Action News correspondent Rebecca Chang, the two make off to the arena security room to check out the footage of the attack, only to find that the place is completely trashed, all evidence seemingly destroyed. Defeated, Frank heads back into the safe house as Stacy is being threatened to be given the boot by security officer Sullivan for being a Cure member, and after seeing the news report, wants nothing to do with her as he believes she is responsible for causing the outbreak. During this is when Frank sees the same member of Cure, Brandon Whitaker, drag a woman into the stalls in the New Uranus Zone, which this fight ends up playing out essentially the same as Dead Rising 2, minus the zombies popping out of the stalls. However, with the added context that he is the one observed by Frank at the beginning taking the money and the bomb from TK. Clearly, he's not mentally all there and continues to spout off about being a part of Cure before his death. So with that information, Frank goes to grill Stacy once more.
Has meaning again. It's perfect this way. So I'm on board now. It's the only way, man.
What about TK?
I'm a soldier for the cause, man.
Deflecting that he was actually a new member and she never knew him nor advocates for violence. On the monitors again, Frank spots a group of unknown men and TK loading large cases onto a train in the underground. Heading down there, Frank gets the shot with his photo camera and then actually shot, only to be confronted by TK as he escapes. Heading back to the safe room to report, explosions are felt in the safe house, as TK's men are now moving to rob the casinos in Fortune City. Frank rushes out to stop them, and upon destroying the armored van outside, he saves Rebecca from the explosion of the van and takes her back to the safe room yet again. We come back here a lot, just FYI. It turns out that Rebecca actually has a lead here in the mall that she's meeting that night and wants Frank to meet together, now actually working together to break the case. After a long stint of saving survivors, Frank heads down to the Americana Casino to learn that Rebecca has actually been kidnapped by TK and wants Frank to pay for the cash that he lost out on and robbing the vaults, demanding $1 million by 7 a.m. or Rebecca dies.
Key West, you've been messing things up for me pretty good. Time for a little payback.
TK. Where the hell is she?
You're gonna go get me that money you cost me with your little game, Frank. $1 million by 7 o'clock.
How in the hell am I going to do that?
It's Fortune City, Frank. The land of riches. Get creative. Bring it to the show nightclub, and we might just let you see your little girlfriend again.
Don't you touch her.
Oh, too late. See you then, Frank.
This is the moment that I talked about earlier, where you had to collect a cool million from around town in order to progress. With some tricks, books, and money hackers, it's not the hardest task in the world to complete, but this was a major stopgap for me, resorting to crafting a ton of money hackers and hacking the 6 ATMs outside on the Silver Strip, netting 40 grand per set of 2 ATMs, all while also having the longest stint of survivor saving at the same time. I do wish there was some more actual missions here for the story to keep the pace up and going, but I could see why Capcom wanted to do something with actual money here. Back to it, after collecting the million, Frank heads to the Yucatan Casino, where he hands over the million and promptly is attacked by Amber and Crystal Bailey, the TNA that have been on TK's right hand and eye candy since the beginning of both games. After killing one, the other sister essentially commits seppuku.
She was my other half. But you'll pay. You will never get out of here alive, Frank. We promise you that. All of us! I'll never be complete again. Never!
No, don't!
And both lie dead in the middle of the dance floor. We bring Rebecca back to the safe house once again, only for her to inform Frank that TK was actually planning on leaving the city in a helicopter and the two leave to go stop him. Frank thwarts the escape attempt by taking out the helicopter at the rotor, and TK is knocked out, with Frank carrying him back again to the safe house for interrogation.
It was a hell of a show.
Guess ratings must have been down.
Now all there is to do is wait for the military to roll in. So with any inkling of a good film shot, Frank and Rebecca both move to the rooftops to get footage of the military rolling in. It's here that we meet Dwight Boykin, commander of the mission, along with his men, roll in on a group of Humvees and proceed to sweep and clear the entire area when an unknown gas pours out of the vents onto the streets and seem to turn the zombies into some sort of super zombie, like they did in the original Dead Rising 2. In the chaos, Rebecca gets grabbed by a fleeing Dwight, leaving Frank to pursue. Dwight may be the most hateable boss in this game, as well as maybe the saddest. When he leaves the Humvee for the first time, you can tell from the get that he is not a good dude. Having little concern for the situation at hand, he comes across as an asshole, to be honest. However, as the chaos of watching his men get ripped to shreds, he is stunned. Something obviously snapped. No longer the badass he tries to be when he gets out, and this doubly goes so for when he grabs one of his men's arm to take him to safety, only to have it rip off at the elbow. When we meet him again in the garage, he is still talking to his dead men, attempting to hold the zombies at bay, again showing signs of breaking under the strain. It's a quick scene, but profoundly sad for some reason. However, he did steal our girl, and so he must be buried. After beating him down and him exploding himself, literally, here are his boots, we take Rebecca to safety once more, as she's also hurt herself in the chaos. Getting Rebecca back, Frank, Stacy, and Rebecca discuss their next moves when the barrier to the outside world is open and the zombies come flooding into the safe house, with TK being bit in the mix. It's here that you can choose to either give him Zombrex or not, and let him become a zombie, but in order to get the overtime mode and for the sake of the video, we're going to give him the dose. I hate this guy. Closing the door, Frank heads to the underground to discover the origin of the gas, only to find that the pharmaceutical company known as Phenotrans has set up a harvesting machine that holds the queen bees, those bugs that act as carrier for the zombie virus. After murdering the scientists and grabbing a sat phone and laptop with the Phenotrans data, Frank heads back to the safe room to show his discovery. As Rebecca begins to call her TV station for rescue due to the military moving into firebomb Fortune City, she is shot in the stomach by none other than Stacy, who turns out to be working for Phenotrans this entire time. After blasting Sullivan away, she makes an escape onto the Silver Strip, where there are now Phenotrans mercenary guarding a host of queen collectors set out to harvest more bees. Taking those out, Frank confronts Stacy in the Uranus Zone, where she explains that Kira was just a front for Phenotrans in order to cause more outbreaks and allow the company to harvest queens and drive up the demand for Zombrex, which uses queens to help create the drug in the first place. In a fight with a giant mechanized ride, Frank defeats the machine and Stacy, only for her to get crushed by the falling head and allowing Frank to use the sat phone once again to call for help.
Extraction. Yeah, I just have an old newspaper that needs to be taken out to the trash.
Always thought you had a crush on me. Too bad I don't dig flat chicks. Channel 6 Action News. This is Frank West. Someone lied to you. There's a bunker full of survivors in Fortune City. I need rescue choppers. And I need them right now. Before that firebombing begins.
As the last of the survivors pull away, Frank goes back to make sure TK is brought with to answer for his crimes, only to find him missing and Rebecca as well, her press badge and walkie being the only thing that's left, bringing us to the end of the main game. But as we know about Dead Rising, that is not all we have to do, as there's still some overtime to put in.
TK.
Thanks for the Zombrex, Frankie. You know what? You should have checked out your lady friend's body a bit more carefully. I sure did.
What?
The walkie kicks on, TK's voice ringing through the speaker, and Rebecca in the background. Turns out she is not dead, and in the commotion, TK grabbed her and took off, sending Frank on a scavenger hunt around the mall for stuff he wants, like a cache of Zombrex, a bottle of champagne, some silk underpants, and medicine. Frank mad dashes through the mall once more, only to meet TK again in the arena. As Frank makes his way inside, he is cattle prodded in the back, knocking him out and thrown into the wrestling ring once more, where we began this entire adventure. Now, with the strength of Frank from our time in the mall, Fighting this horde seems a ton easier, even with TK's taunts in the background. Eventually, Rebecca crawls over to a rope and tosses it down for Frank, activating a winch to help him bring up to save her and stop TK. This leads to a knockdown drag-out fight where we pummel his face in with 2x4s and baseball bats, while also keeping Rebecca alive as she's still bleeding out. Eventually, Frank bests TK and tossing him off the banister to his death, ending in a warm scene with Frank taking Rebecca and asking her if she wants to break the story together with him. In reaching the end and while looking through the story again, there's not much that is actually drastically different on a beat-to-beat note in what you do from this game compared to the original. You will always fight Brandon, you will always destroy the helicopter, the door to the safe room will always fail. However, as a story centered around Frank, the entire plot almost works far better with Frank at the wheel, attempting to break the case to regain his glory rather than Chuck just trying to clear his name. Chuck is a motorcycle guy, not an investigator. He is thrust into a scenario, whereas Frank jumps in with both feet, having survived this before. He's a reporter, so it's more logical that his powers of deduction are more on point than Chuck's could ever be. There's also a much better dynamic between Frank and Rebecca as well, both being reporters with tons of casual flirting, or not so casual, and come-ons from both sides, pun intended. There's a shared camaraderie there that just works for both characters. It also helps that I just prefer Frank as a character. Chuck was fine, but Frank, even from the first game, had a style and flair about him that lends far greater to the crazy, wacky shit going on in the Dead Rising universe. The amount of one-liners, quips, innuendos, and threats mixed with the serious and still caring nature that is Frank create a character that is absolutely hard to replace, so getting to play him again here in Fortune City was to me a far better experience. I love Dead Rising 2, and based on the feedback, a lot of you do too. However, if you haven't played Dead Rising 2 off the record for feel that it might be too similar to the original sequel, I feel like that you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice. It's still everything to love and hate about Dead Rising 2, but off the record wraps a new foil around it to make it, in my eyes, a stronger and more fun narrative experience. But with that, Dead Rising 2 off the record must come to a close, as well as Dead Rising as a whole, hopefully just for now. Again, this is a series that really started the growth of this channel when I switched from making videos rather than just streaming all the time, and I will always have a soft spot in my heart for this entire franchise. But what did you think of Dead Rising off the record? Let me know in the comments down below, like this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you to my members listed here for all of your support, and until next time, take care of yourselves, and thank you for watching.
You say, you and me, go break this story wide